There's always been something about the small town mystery story that speaks to me. Maybe it's because I grew up in a small town with a lot of history, but there was nothing more I wanted than to uncover some secret underground lab or find a pirate's secret treasure with my friends. I think a lot of people who grew up in smaller towns can relate to this. The possibility of something actually exciting happening in your small town seemed equally exciting and impossible. So naturally, I gravitated towards movies like The Goonies and It, to a degree, and also Stand By Me. And when Stranger Things came along, it seemed to put into words everything that I had felt for my whole life. But as time went on, Stranger Things changed identities. Movies like The Goonies were great, but didn't give me that same exciting feeling as I had the first several dozen times that I watched it. And most unfortunately, I grew up. If there were any small town secrets to find, my friends and I failed to uncover them. But somewhere between The Goonies and Stranger Things, this small-town mystery genre of story got lost. That was until someone tried to bring it back. That man is JJ Abrams. Now, say what you want about the guy.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
But I've actually always been a fan of JJ Abrams. I love listening to him talk about the mystery box, a style of storytelling that sometimes does more harm than good, and a style that's definitely not for everybody, but it's something that I've always thought was intriguing when it's utilized correctly. And when it is, I think it's one of the most successful storytelling engines out there. So that brings me ultimately to what this video is about. The movie that I consider to be JJ Abrams' Magnum Opus, the 2011 film Super 8. Super 8 has everything that works in stories like Stranger Things or The Goonies, and also capitalizes on the mystery box style of storytelling that so many people, JJ included, often get wrong. The film itself borrows elements from many Spielberg films, other films that I've mentioned, and draws personal inspiration from JJ Abrams' childhood. You see, I've always liked this movie a lot. I first watched it when I was in middle school. It really drew me into Abrams and his work, and inspired me to watch movies like The Goonies and even go rummaging around my small town with my friends, hoping to uncover some sort of sinister plot that goes right to the top. But I feel I'm largely alone when it comes to this experience. Not completely alone, as I can see from this person's review on IMDb, but I think that most people out there, and most people who will click on this video, will more or less share Bruce149's thoughts. And he's not wrong. A lot of this movie is rehashing old territory and plot lines that have been done 100 times before. But as somebody who watched this movie before all the other ones, this movie was a 10 out of 10 masterpiece. And while it didn't do terribly financially or critically, I think this movie is so often forgotten about because another franchise came along a few years later and did everything this movie did, but did it on Netflix, so it reached a much wider audience. The other day I saw an article about Super 8, and I saw a comment along the lines of, "Oh, you mean that movie that just copied Stranger Things?" Which just is a statement with so many issues I don't even know where to start. But that commenter made a few more statements that clearly showed their age, and it got me thinking about this entire subgenre. Stranger Things is the Gen Z version of all these kinds of stories. The Goonies was for my mom's generation, but my generation's version of the story is Super 8. But it didn't get nearly as much love as these other movies and shows get, so that's what this video is going to be. I'm going to go over all the stuff that I really liked from the movie, address some of the cheesiness and rehashing plot lines that are in so many other movies like this, dive deep into the JJ Abrams mystery box style of storytelling. So grab your cameras, your weird Rubik's Cubes, and let's head into the world of Super 8. For those of you who have never seen this movie, I'd highly recommend giving it a watch. This video is going to be filled with spoilers, so I suggest watching it for yourself first and then coming back. With that out of the way, Super 8 is a story about a group of friends trying to make a zombie movie for an upcoming film festival. Our central character, Joe Lamb, is grieving from the recent loss of his mother, who was killed in a work accident. The friends get a girl from school named Alice to star in their movie, whose dad is sort of responsible for the death of Joe's mother because it was supposed to be his shift, so their parents obviously don't get along. When the friends are filming their movie, they witness a train crash that ultimately sends them down a path of unraveling a mystery about what was on that train that the government was hiding. We see that whatever it is, it's big, it's scary, and it's some sort of monster. Joe's father, Jackson, the chief of police, tries to work with the government so that way he can ease the worries of the townspeople, but whatever the government is hiding is clearly above Jackson's pay grade. Strange things start happening all around town, so the friends continue shooting their movie while Jackson digs deeper into what the government is hiding. The town eventually gets taken over by the government, and after Alice gets taken by the monster, the kids go on a mission to rescue her, while Jackson has to work with Alice's father, Lewis, to find their kids. The monster, as it turns out, was the reason all these strange things were happening around town, because all it wanted was to find its way home. I'm working on shorter recaps, alright? How was that? So this movie gets a lot of hate for being a ripoff of Steven Spielberg movies, except he's a producer of this film. His E.T. logo is right there at the beginning of the movie, so clearly he was either alright with everything or had a hand in its creation. Right off the bat, we get the amazing score by Michael Giacchino, and I feel like I say this in every review for a movie that Michael Giacchino does the score for, but he knocks it out of the park here, as usual. The soundtrack is absolutely incredible, and it invokes all the right feelings. From the very first scene, this movie gets the most important aspect of the whole film correct, and that's the dynamic between the friends. Each of these stories shares this in common. The heart of all these films is the friendship all the young characters have. If you don't have that, the movie simply won't work. But this movie gets that right. Their friendship and the dynamics between them is fantastic. It's funny when it needs to be, it's heartfelt when it needs to be, and they all seem and act like actual friends. But it's more than just dialogue and dynamic that the story has to get right. There always is a very large cast of characters, and they need to stand out and have a reason for being there. Joe is the protagonist, so he's inherently a bit boring, but he's also the most shy one of the group. Therefore, he's the makeup artist. Carrie is the chaotic one who loves explosions, the camera person. Preston is the one with presumably social anxiety and is a bit awkward, therefore he's a background actor. Martin is the most popular kid in the group and also the dumbest, so the lead actor. Charles is the leader of the group and the most expressive and commanding, aka the director. And Alice is the girl of the group. But she's also very similar to Joe, both a bit shy and haunted. They just show it in different ways. She's the lead actress, who is far better at acting than all these kids, both in the movie that they're making and in the movie in general. But for this to be expressed through their roles in the short film also helps differentiate each kid, and I think that's a very clever and unique thing to do, even in this genre. After the intro of the movie sets up the plot and the death of Joe's mother, it also has that cheesy transition that all teenage movies have, and I love it. We get to see a bit more about the kids' plotline and the movie that they're making, and honestly, it's not bad. I'd love to get a sequel for this film for a lot of reasons, even if they made it today. Disregard all the sci-fi elements and the plot of this film. I just want the sequel to be focused on how all these kids turned out as filmmakers. I went to film school, and this is better than 95% of the projects that I've seen from college-aged student filmmakers. It's very reminiscent of Evil Dead, which was also a student project, so who knows, maybe Charles is the next Sam Raimi. While the dynamic between the friends is important, the true heart of this film is all about the parents and their relationships with their children. Particularly the parents who want their children to be one way, but they turn out a different way. Early on, Joe's dad Jackson says that he wants him to go away to some camp and meet different friends who aren't obsessed with zombies and makeup, but obviously in the scenes with Joe and his friends, he has such a great time with them, and they're all not really bad kids. I mean, they do things like steal their parents' car, break all kinds of rules, break the law a few times, but they all have each other's backs. I think this dynamic between parent and child is the reason why this film resonates with me so strongly personally. Yes, it's been done before, but I think it's a message that can come through so strongly in this small town mystery genre. The actors in this film are all incredible. Kyle Chandler plays the stern dad super well, see Eric Taylor, but I also feel like he's been typecast in this role, and he's been great in everything that he does, even though it's mostly the stern southern father. This was the breakout role for Elle Fanning, sister of Dakota Fanning, and she proved that clearly that family has been eating or drinking something different from all of us, because they are all extremely talented. But the other actors haven't really done much other than Elle Fanning obviously, but some of these kids have stopped acting entirely. Riley Griffiths, who plays Charles, hasn't been in anything since 2011. I'd say I feel bad, but maybe they're just up to other things that they prefer over acting. The movie kind of goes from 0 to 100 really fast with the train crash sequence. I mean, this all looks fantastic even a decade later, but it's so over the top that it almost seems a bit unnecessary. But that was actually done on purpose. JJ Abrams wanted it to be an homage to some of the over-the-top action sequences from the 70s films, but also have it be like what the kids would remember it as if they're like recalling the story to somebody else. When you put that lens over it, it makes the scene make complete sense because these kids would definitely blow the story out of proportion. While there are some other big moments in the film, this definitely takes the cake as the craziest thing to happen. Despite its maybe overused budget in this scene, it's still a great inciting incident for the plot. Is it unrealistic that the guy who drove onto the tracks somehow ends up alive by the end of it? Yes, but it comes with the territory and it sets the plot in motion, so it's fine. The kids get the first piece of the puzzle and run away when the military arrives, and Dr. Jenner is here, so you know whatever was on the train can't be good. The mystery is introduced and evolves throughout the film in a very interesting way. We hear the monster roar, Joe gets the Rubik's Cube, and then the military occupies the town. We feel like we know what's happening, and we kind of do, but it still makes the mystery unfolding really interesting to see. Also, side note, Charles saying things are mint is something that we need to bring back.
Alice, that was mint. She was mint, but she's never gonna do it. Holy shit, that's mint. Cut! That was mint.
I have to comment on the group's dynamic once again. I'd go as far as to say that this friend dynamic is better written than most others that come out of this genre entirely. The only other ones I'd say are either better or at least on par are the Goonies and the first season of Stranger Things. I've also expressed my love for Kyle Chandler, but I like that we get to see his side of the story and how his storyline has a direct influence on his decisions throughout the course of the film. We needed to have a chief of police in this story because, of course, we did, but getting to see the adult perspective is not only unique for this genre, but I think it also helped sell tickets at the time because this wasn't just a movie about kids uncovering a mystery. Jack has just as big of a part in uncovering everything as the kids do, and I'm gonna say it, I don't think we get Chief Hopper if we didn't have Jackson Lamb. I also don't think we get Stranger Things if we didn't get Super 8. The tone of the movie is also balanced out really well. There are humorous moments because of the dialogue, but I think this leans more into horror than any movie that came before it. Stranger Things obviously leans more into horror, but again, I think Super 8 paved the way for that. There's a scene where the monster attacks the gas station and the sign is spinning just in time to cover up the creature, and this has JJ Abrams written all over it to prolong the mystery while also delivering a horrifying scene, and I think it's great. As the film continues on, the mystery starts to get even deeper and weirder. Again, classic JJ Abrams. There are all these missing dogs, car engines, microwaves, and the police are trying to make sense of it while not getting cooperation from the government, but since the audience is also in the dark for all of this, and we keep seeing glimpses of the monster attacking people, we want to root for Jackson and the kids to continue unraveling everything, which is especially cool for Jackson because we've already been kind of set up to root against him because he doesn't seem like the greatest father. These mysteries kind of persist throughout the whole film. Usually mysteries are introduced and then slowly start to be revealed, leading to some big reveal in the third act, but in this film, all of the mysteries are kind of introduced within a 10-minute span, and each answer is related to the same thing, so we're really left in the dark with no resolution whatsoever until that big third act reveal. And some of these mysteries just don't end up getting solved at all. Classic JJ Abrams. I mentioned earlier that a big theme of this film is the parent-child dynamic, and that's very relevant for Joe and Alice with their single fathers. But there's the extra dynamic of these two families not getting along that's set up in the opening scene. With how well Joe and Alice get along, it also sends a message to the kids watching the film to not repeat the sins of the previous generation. Just because your parents don't like each other doesn't mean that you don't have to like each other. The kids also have a very personal storyline. Joe and Alice start getting along really well because they can both relate to each other, but Charles is clearly jealous of it. She helps him stand up to Charles, who is a bit of a bully towards Joe, and he helps her by being there when it seems like nobody else truly is. It's also the driving force for their parents to finally come together at the end. With all the scenes in which we could see the monster, there's always a clever way to hide it, or at least obscure it from our view, other than the camera just deciding not to show it. We only truly see it after we understand it, aka when it no longer becomes the monster. It was also motion capture work done by, yep, you guessed it, Bruce Greenwood. Gotcha there, didn't I? The bus attack sequence is really great and offers us our first actual glimpse at the monster, and it's also definitely the peak of the horror in the film. Most of these soldiers get absolutely demolished in a brutal manner, but the scene balances out with some more humor because of the boys' reaction to what they're seeing. The third act culminates both storylines with Joe going underground to find Alice and everybody else who the monster is trying to make float, and Jack and Lewis coming together to try and find their kids. While Joe in the kids' storyline is very hero's journey and pretty much what you expect out of a story like this, the message that really hits home is the fathers ultimately trying to do what's best for their kids. That's part of the reason why I think this movie is so special and stories like this are so special. Growing up, I identified with the kids rebelling against your parents because you think you know what's right, but as life has gone on, things have gotten tough. I see two fathers who are trying their best. They're not doing a great job, but they're still trying and they're coming together when it matters the most. That's definitely not how I saw this movie the first time I watched it. While the kids befriending the monster is something that we've seen before, the whole movie sets up the monster to be, well, a monster. It's pretty great misdirection when the monster doesn't turn out to be bad, at least not for the kids, but this thing still kills like dozens of people. But especially when you're watching this movie and this genre for the first time, it doesn't seem like something that would happen. You'd think the kids would have to go down there to kill the creature. They even set this up by having Carrie go down with Joe, the one with all the explosives. But this movie also goes the E.T. route, where Joe and Alice can learn to forgive their troubled past by identifying with the monster. They understand that it's scared and it doesn't know what to do in life and just wants things to return the way they were, and the monster recognizes that in Joe, so he lets him go. That's at least what I took from it. JJ Abrams says it's about facing your fears so that way you can move on from them, which is basically, yeah, tomato, tomato. This is very clearly demonstrated by Joe having to let go of the locket so that way the creature can leave and go home. This is ultimately a story about moving on from the past, no matter how hard or traumatic it is. There's always life ahead, and I think the alien leaving demonstrates that really well. I have to mention my love for Cloverfield and how well this movie and this monster would fit into that universe. I know it's not part of it, but I can still dream. The ending and the creature making the ship and leaving do all happen really quickly, and the movie just kinda ends. But I like how ambiguous this creature is. We don't have all the answers, but the story makes sense nonetheless. I defend JJ Abrams a lot because I like how he does this, but it's not just the thing he does. You don't want all the answers at the end of the film. If you have all the answers, you tend to forget about the movie. Questions are what make the story live on. Also, I learned that this is JJ Abrams' only original film that he's ever done. Everything else that he's done has either been a remake or a sequel, which is kinda crazy if you ask me. I think it's interesting how with movies like this, your perspective can change over time. While it's nice to relive the golden days and have scenes like this,
Can we get another order of fries because my friend here is fat?
Funny chompers. At least I don't have to use a booster seat.
and it reminds me of times I had with my friends, I also appreciate the storyline of a father trying to do his best and be there for his kids when it really counts. I think this movie is missing a scene like 6 months later of these two families having game night or something like that. Would it be super cheesy? Yes. But this movie itself is cheesy, and this whole genre is cheesy. I'll always be fascinated by the small town mystery genre. We all wanted, or at least I did, something like this to happen in our small town, for us to be the hero of the story, to find the treasure, to kill the monster, or befriend the monster depending on the monster itself. But the reality is, none of us have ever done that. And if you have, I need you to message me right away. But this genre allows us to live vicariously through the characters' experiences. These movies can have great messages that are unique to every viewer, or you can kind of just shut your brain off, laugh at the friends, and try to solve the mystery before they do. Super 8 was a very special film to me growing up because it was the first of its kind, at least it was in my eyes. After watching more films like this, I can see that Super 8 is nothing incredibly special in the time that it was released, but to me it was. And unfortunately, I don't think that's a sentiment shared by a lot of people. There are far more successful entries in this subgenre, whether that be stories that came before this time or after. making Super 8 a strange outlier in what is usually a very successful genre. It doesn't have the popularity of Stranger Things, it hasn't really stood the test of time like the Goonies, which is unfortunate because I believe if this movie came out years prior or even years after, it would be so much better remembered. If you haven't seen it, or even if you have seen it, give it another watch. If you can't resonate with the themes it has, then just enjoy the dynamic of the friends. I bet you after a few years, with a new perspective, you might find something new to enjoy. There's not a lot of original ideas here, but the stuff it does well, it excels in. So for that reason, I'm giving Super 8 a mint out of 10. Which translates roughly to like an 8.5.
Cut! That was mint!
Yeah.